For centuries, women's voices were stifled, dismissed, or ignored by the dominant structures of society. The power of a woman's voice was often seen as threatening, irrelevant, or simply unworthy of attention. In many cultures, women were expected to remain silent or to speak only when spoken to, and even then their words were frequently undervalued. This historical silence wasn't just a social norm. It was a strategy of control that kept women in subordinate roles. For much of human history, their voices were kept in the shadows, excluded from major political, intellectual, and social discussions. But in silence, women found their resilience. They did not cease to think, feel, or observe. They may have been silenced by the outside world, but they were speaking among themselves, sharing stories, struggles, and strategies for survival. Women's voices were not absent, but often were channeled through alternative means, such as letters, poetry, and secret gatherings. These informal networks allowed women to express their frustrations, desires, and dreams in ways that often circumvented the oppressive systems that tried to keep them quiet. Their voices were whispered in private spaces, but these whispered voices grew louder over time, especially as movements for gender equality and civil rights began to emerge in the 19th and 20th centuries. What started as a quiet undercurrent of resistance began to gain momentum and demand attention. It was in the face of significant resistance that the power of the woman's voice slowly started to be recognized for its true potential. The suffragist movements in the late 19th and early 20th centuries, for example, marked a critical turning point in the fight for women's rights. Women took to the streets, marched, protested, and made their voices heard in ways that had been unimaginable before. The suffragettes understood that a woman's voice, if given the space to be heard, could challenge the foundations of political and social systems that had systematically oppressed them. In gaining the right to vote, women were no longer simply being spoken for. They were finally speaking for themselves. This moment was not just about voting rights, but about recognizing women as legitimate participants in the democratic process. It was a loud declaration that a woman's voice mattered. The struggles continued well into the 20th century, as women fought for equal access to education, better working conditions, and reproductive rights. During the feminist movements of the 1960s and 1970s, women began to demand more than just the right to vote. They began to demand equality in every sphere of life. They were no longer content with being mere bystanders in conversations that affected their own lives. The women's liberation movement of the 1960s and beyond showed how powerful and transformative a woman's voice could be when harnessed collectively. Women spoke up about issues like sexual harassment, domestic violence, and equal pay. Their voices filled classrooms, courtrooms, and living rooms, asserting that they were no longer willing to be invisible or ignored. Today, women's voices are more powerful and more visible than ever before. The Me Too movement, for example, brought global attention to issues of sexual harassment and assault, with women across the world using their voices to say "Me Too" and to demand justice. The women's marches in cities worldwide show how women continue to unite their voices in solidarity, whether advocating for reproductive rights, fighting against gender-based violence, or pushing for greater representation in political and corporate leadership. Yet, while much has changed, the struggle to have a woman's voice heard is far from over. In many parts of the world, women still face extreme silencing through laws, customs, or violence. The fight for equality is ongoing, and the power of a woman's voice remains an essential tool for progress. Women continue to speak out, stand up, and demand the right to be heard in every corner of society. When women speak, they are not only expressing themselves, they are reshaping the world around them, and their voices are a catalyst for change. As we look back on history, it's clear that the silence imposed on women was never truly silence. Their voices were there, sometimes whispered, sometimes shouted, but always there, waiting for the moment when they could break free and be recognized. Today, women continue to find strength in their voices, and through their collective efforts, the world is beginning to understand the immense power that was always within them. The rise of women in leadership has been one of the most profound shifts in modern society. Historically, leadership positions were dominated by men, often viewed as the only ones capable of guiding nations, companies, and communities. For centuries, women were largely excluded from formal leadership roles, confined to the private spheres of home and family. Their influence was typically indirect, their contributions relegated to behind-the-scenes efforts, while their voices went unheard in decision-making circles. However, over the last century, this narrative has slowly but surely been upended. The first significant break in this pattern came with the women's suffrage movements, which fought for and eventually secured women's right to vote. This wasn't just about access to the ballot box. It was a declaration that women, too, had the right to be part of the decisions shaping society. It was a statement that women's voices could no longer be ignored. Following this, more and more women began stepping into roles that had previously been off-limits. In politics, we saw the emergence of pioneering figures such as Margaret Thatcher, who became the Prime Minister of the United Kingdom, and Indira Gandhi, who led India as its Prime Minister for over a decade. These women not only broke glass ceilings in their respective countries, but also set the stage for women around the world to envision themselves in positions of power. In the corporate world, women like Oprah Winfrey, who transformed media and became a global cultural figure, and Sheryl Sandberg, who reshaped the tech industry through her work at Facebook, have proven that leadership doesn't have a gender. These women, alongside many others, have created pathways for younger generations to follow. Their rise to the top of their fields has been a powerful reminder that leadership is about vision, strategy, and influence, qualities that transcend gender. However, the journey to leadership is not without its obstacles. Women still face significant barriers, from gender discrimination to societal expectations about their roles and behaviors. Women in leadership positions are often held to higher standards and face greater scrutiny than their male counterparts. The double-edged sword of being both a leader and a woman means that the qualities that would be celebrated in a male leader, confidence, ambition, decisiveness, can be viewed as too aggressive or unfeminine when displayed by a woman. Yet, despite these challenges, the number of women in leadership roles continues to grow, and the impact they're having on global issues, from climate change to social justice, is undeniable. Women's leadership is often characterized by collaboration, empathy, and inclusivity. Research has shown that women leaders are more likely to foster environments of cooperation and support, qualities that are especially important in today's interconnected and rapidly changing world. This collaborative leadership style doesn't just benefit women, it has ripple effects, improving organizations, communities, and societies as a whole. Women often bring diverse perspectives, allowing for more innovative solutions and broader representation of society's needs. The rise of women in leadership is not only about individual success, but also about creating a new vision for what leadership can look like in the modern world. It's about redefining power and authority, moving away from outdated notions of hierarchy and control. Women leaders are showing the world that leadership is not about domination, but about uplifting others, sharing power, and building consensus. In the future, the power of a woman's voice in leadership will only continue to grow. As more women take their rightful place at decision-making tables, we can expect more inclusive, compassionate, and forward-thinking leadership to guide the way. Women are no longer content with merely being in the background. They are boldly stepping into roles that have historically been reserved for others, and their influence is creating a ripple effect that will change the course of history for generations to come. A woman's voice is often a reflection of deep empathy, compassion, and an innate understanding of human connection. These qualities have shaped the way women communicate and lead in both personal and professional spheres. The ability to listen attentively, recognize the emotions of others, and offer supportive feedback is a powerful tool. In a world where so many of our conversations are marked by division, competition, and misunderstanding, a woman's voice, rooted in empathy, has the potential to foster understanding, healing, and unity. Empathy is a powerful yet often underestimated form of leadership. It allows individuals to connect on a human level, to recognize the shared experiences that bind us together rather than the differences that separate us. When women speak, they frequently draw upon their lived experiences and the stories of others, offering a perspective that often seeks to lift others up rather than promote self-interest. Whether in the home, workplace, or community, women's voices have long been associated with caregiving, emotional labor, and relational wisdom. These qualities, sometimes dismissed as soft or secondary, are in fact essential to creating meaningful relationships and establishing long-term success in both personal and professional life. In leadership, this empathy can lead to more inclusive decision-making, where every voice is heard and valued. Women often excel at creating spaces where people feel comfortable sharing their thoughts and concerns, encouraging collaboration and cooperation rather than fostering competition or division. In the workplace, this can translate into stronger team dynamics, better communication, and an overall environment where people are not only productive, but also feel valued. Leaders who lead with empathy understand the complexities of their team members' lives, and this emotional intelligence fosters loyalty and trust, allowing individuals to thrive. Beyond the workplace, a woman's voice rooted in empathy has the power to bridge cultural, generational, and social divides. Women, through their experiences as daughters, mothers, sisters, and friends, often understand the importance of connection in ways that transcend formal education or professional training. They offer wisdom in the form of nurturing advice, encouragement, and emotional support, often in spaces where others may struggle to find common ground. This ability to connect on a deeply personal level is one of the reasons why women's voices are so impactful in movements for social justice and human rights. In activism, women often draw upon their empathy to advocate for those whose voices have been silenced. Whether it's in the fight for gender equality, racial justice, or LGBTQ+ rights, women have played pivotal roles in organizing and leading movements that aim to give a voice to the marginalized. Women like Rosa Parks, Malala Yousafzai, and Maya Angelou have used their own stories of struggle and resilience to amplify the voices of others, and through their empathy, they have built bridges of understanding between different groups, creating movements that are rooted in compassion and solidarity. A woman's voice can also provide a sense of comfort and healing during difficult times. In families, communities, and even nations, women have often been the caretakers of emotional well-being, offering reassurance and guidance in the face of hardship. Their voices can soothe pain, lift spirits, and remind others of their worth and potential. In times of conflict or crisis, a woman's voice can bring clarity and perspective, cutting through the noise to remind people of their shared humanity. In a world that sometimes feels fragmented and divisive, the voice of a woman infused with empathy and compassion is a powerful force for healing and unity. Women have always had the ability to foster connection and understanding, and their voices continue to inspire those around them to listen, to understand, and to act with kindness and compassion. Through their words, they remind us of what it means to be human, and in doing so, they leave a lasting impact on the world around them. Throughout history, women have used their voices to challenge and redefine societal norms that have long dictated how they should behave, think, and exist within the world. For centuries, traditional roles assigned to women were not only restrictive, but also deeply entrenched in culture, religion, and law. Women were expected to be silent, passive, and obedient, particularly in matters of power and authority. But as time has passed, women have broken free from these shackles, finding new ways to speak out and challenge the systems that have tried to limit their potential. The journey toward challenging societal expectations began with the earliest feminist movements, which questioned the very foundation of gender roles. Women began to demand the same rights and freedoms as men, and through their activism, they created a platform for future generations to build upon. As women pushed for equal education, property rights, and suffrage, their voices grew louder and more assertive, breaking through the silence that had been imposed on them. This wasn't just about equality in terms of legal rights. It was about claiming the right to live, think, and speak freely in a world that had long silenced them. Women's voices in these early movements began to speak not just for themselves, but for the generations of women who'd been born into systems of oppression. The suffragists, for example, made their voices heard across the world, demanding the right to vote, to participate in governance, and to have a say in the laws that shape their lives. The power of their voices did not only challenge the legal structures of their time, but it also challenged the very notion of what women could and should be capable of. Through their efforts, the societal perception of women began to shift, and women's roles began to expand beyond the domestic sphere. In the decades that followed, women continued to challenge the status quo in areas like the workplace, the home, and the media. They began to redefine what it meant to be a woman, rejecting the idea that their worth was tied solely to their ability to nurture, to marry, or to conform to a narrow set of expectations. In the 1960s and 1970s, second-wave feminism called attention to issues like reproductive rights, sexual freedom, and workplace discrimination, highlighting the ways in which women were held back by systems designed to keep them in place. Their voices rose in unison, demanding not only the freedom to be seen as equals, but also the freedom to define their own paths and identities. This act of redefining norms wasn't limited to activism. In literature, art, and culture, women began to tell their own stories, challenging stereotypes and revealing the complex, multifaceted lives they led. Writers like Toni Morrison, Maya Angelou, and Virginia Woolf used their words to subvert traditional portrayals of women, highlighting their strength, intellect, and depth. In doing so, they opened doors for future generations of women to express their individuality and to carve out spaces for themselves in a world that had long tried to silence their voices. Even today, women continue to challenge and reshape norms. The Me Too movement, for example, redefined the conversation around sexual harassment and assault, giving women everywhere a platform to share their stories and demand change. What was once an unspoken topic, hidden in shame and silence, became a global conversation that forced society to confront the pervasive nature of gendered violence. Through their voices, women not only changed the conversation, but also began to change the cultural and legal structures that had allowed such abuse to persist. The power of a woman's voice is ultimately about resistance, resisting the constraints that society has placed upon women, and fighting to create a world where women can define their own identities. Through speaking out, challenging norms, and reshaping perceptions, women have demonstrated time and time again that their voices are not only powerful, but also transformative. And as they continue to challenge the systems that seek to confine them, their voices will undoubtedly continue to shape the world for generations to come. Women have long used their voices in the media and arts to challenge prevailing narratives, raise awareness about pressing societal issues, and promote positive change. Throughout history, the arts and media have played crucial roles in shaping cultural perceptions, and for much of that time, women were excluded from having significant influence in these spaces. Yet, despite the barriers and limitations they faced, women have always found ways to use their talents, creativity, and perspectives to speak out, telling their stories in ways that resonate deeply with audiences and shift public consciousness. The rise of women in the media and arts has been transformative, not only in terms of representation, but in the way these platforms have been used to advocate for social justice. Women like Maya Angelou, who used poetry and autobiographical writing to tell powerful stories of resilience, and Oprah Winfrey, who revolutionized the talk show format and became a global symbol of empowerment, exemplify how women have used their voices to amplify important issues and connect with millions of people. These voices have inspired countless individuals to think differently about the world, sparking conversations about race, gender, identity, and power. In film and television, women have long fought for representation and recognition. Pioneers like Dorothy Dandridge, who broke racial barriers in Hollywood, and directors like Kathryn Bigelow, the first woman to win an Academy Award for Best Director, proved that women not only belonged in the creative and leadership spaces, but that their perspectives were essential in telling stories that had been underrepresented. More recently, we've seen a surge in women directors, writers, and producers telling stories that reflect a wider array of female experiences. Shows like Fleabag by Phoebe Waller-Bridge and Big Little Lies by Liane Moriarty provide nuanced, complex depictions of women's lives, moving beyond traditional stereotypes and opening up new possibilities for storytelling. The influence of women in the media and arts also extends to the activism they've catalyzed. Take the impact of music, for example, where artists like Beyoncé and Lady Gaga have used their platforms to address themes of empowerment, body positivity, and social justice. Beyoncé's visual album Lemonade not only reshaped the landscape of popular music, but also sparked important conversations about race, gender, and identity. Similarly, Lady Gaga's advocacy for mental health awareness through both her music and activism has provided a voice for millions who struggle in silence. Women in journalism have also wielded their voices to demand accountability and transparency, tackling issues that too often go overlooked. Women journalists like Ida B. Wells, who exposed the horrors of lynching in the American South, and Christiane Amanpour, who reported from conflict zones around the world, have used their voices to bring truth to light. Their work has given voice to the voiceless and sparked social movements, holding power structures to account and making the world a more informed place. Social media in particular has become an important space for women to exercise their voices. and it's a platform that has given rise to new forms of activism. Movements like Me Too and Time's Up gained momentum largely through the efforts of women sharing their personal stories online, using their voices to ignite global change. In a world where traditional media outlets sometimes fall short, social media has become a tool for women to amplify their experiences, challenge societal norms, and unite around causes that demand attention. The power of a woman's voice in the media and arts is not just in its ability to entertain or inform, it lies in its capacity to change minds, inspire action, and move societies forward. Through their words, songs, films, and performances, women continue to shape the cultural and political landscape, making sure that the issues that matter to them and to the world are brought into the spotlight. As more women continue to take up space in the media and arts, the impact of their voices will only grow, creating a more inclusive and just world where everyone's story can be heard. The empowerment of women is deeply intertwined with the power of their voices. When a woman finds the strength to speak up, whether in personal relationships, public spaces, or professional settings, she unlocks a profound potential, not just for herself, but for others around her. The act of speaking up is not always easy, and it often requires courage, resilience, and a willingness to confront the challenges that arise from breaking the silence. Yet, it is through this very act of finding and using their voices that women are able to claim their rights, shape their destinies, and create lasting change for future generations. The empowerment that comes with finding one's voice is rooted in the idea of autonomy and self-determination. For many women, especially those who have been silenced by societal expectations or personal circumstances, the ability to assert their own opinions and desires can feel revolutionary. In some cases, it may begin with small acts of speaking up, asserting a boundary, voicing a need, or standing up for oneself in a conversation. These seemingly small actions are incredibly powerful because they signal a refusal to accept being invisible or unheard. Over time, these actions build a foundation of confidence and self-respect, allowing women to continue challenging the spaces in which they are marginalized or silenced. In professional settings, a woman's voice has the power to dismantle systemic barriers that have historically excluded her from decision-making roles. By speaking up in meetings, offering ideas, and advocating for equal opportunities, women disrupt the status quo and create more inclusive environments. When women step into leadership roles or publicly assert their expertise, they pave the way for others to follow. This is particularly important in fields where women have been underrepresented, such as in STEM or politics. Their voices not only change the dynamics within organizations, but also challenge entire industries to rethink outdated gender norms. Every time a woman speaks out about inequality, discrimination, or injustice in her workplace, she is making it easier for the next woman to do the same. This collective rise is empowering as it sends a powerful message that women are no longer willing to stay silent or accept the status quo. On a broader societal level, women's voices have been crucial in advancing social movements and policy changes that directly benefit their rights and well-being. The civil rights movement, the feminist movement, and the fight for reproductive justice have all been propelled by women who are unwilling to stay silent about the injustices they faced. These movements were not just about individual empowerment, they were collective acts of speaking out against systems of oppression that affected entire communities. For example, the advocacy for reproductive rights and access to health care was largely driven by women who refused to accept restrictions on their autonomy. Through their voices, they challenged laws, fought for policy changes, and opened up conversations about women's bodily autonomy that continue to resonate today. The empowerment that comes with finding one's voice is also about reclaiming control over personal narratives. For too long, women's experiences have been shaped and defined by others, by the media, by institutions, by social expectations. The act of speaking out allows women to reclaim their stories, define their own identities, and shape how they are seen in the world. This is particularly true for marginalized women whose voices have often been doubly silenced due to race, class, or sexuality. When women from these communities speak out about their experiences, they not only empower themselves, but also create a space for others who have been left out of mainstream conversations. Finally, the power of a woman's voice is a tool for global change. From Malala Yousafzai advocating for girls' education to Greta Thunberg calling attention to climate change, women's voices are not limited to local or personal issues. They are global forces for change. Women who speak out often become catalysts for broader societal transformation, challenging international institutions, global policies, and cultural practices. The impact of their voices is felt far beyond their immediate surroundings, creating ripples of change that extend to the furthest corners of the world. Ultimately, the voice of a woman is a tool for personal, social, and global empowerment. When a woman speaks, she asserts her right to be heard and to influence the world around her. Through her voice, she changes not only her own life, but the lives of others, making it easier for future generations of women to live freely, confidently, and authentically. The empowerment of women is in many ways inseparable from the empowerment of their voices. And as more women find their voices, the world becomes a richer, more inclusive place.